According to Merriam-Webster, a bucket list is a list of things someone wants to do before they die. My guest today, Jeremy George, took that concept to a whole new level, attempting 52 bucket list items in just 1 year. That's right, one life-changing experience every single week. The impact was so powerful, it led Jeremy to create his own company called Bucket Match, dedicated to helping others do the same. Get ready to be inspired to start truly living. This is Jeremy George. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Back to another episode of Journey with Jake. I'm your host, Jake Bushman. I had the amazing opportunity to sit down with Jeremy George and talk about his incredible journey of chasing his bucket list. While the adventures themselves were exciting, what really stuck with me were the lessons he learned along the way, especially about the power of community and the importance of having support as we chase our dreams. Before we dive into the conversation, make sure you're subscribed to Journey with Jake wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on YouTube. Just search Journey with Jake Podcast, hit that subscribe button, and give the video a like. If you'd like to connect more and see clips from past and upcoming episodes, follow me on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. And don't forget, Journey with Jake is proud to be part of the Podmatch Podcast Network. If you're looking for other great shows across a variety of topics, check out podmatch.com/network. Talking with Jeremy was such an inspiration, and I know you're going to be moved by his story too. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out episode 116 with David Allen Tracy, another guest who's all about living life to the fullest. All right, let's jump into my conversation with Jeremy George. Well, I'm excited today because I have someone on the podcast that I'm really excited to talk to. I've got Jeremy George with me. Jeremy, welcome to Journey with Jake.
Thanks, Jake. Super happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got a pretty cool story. You're doing something that I think is really cool. You're the owner of Bucket Match, and we're going to talk all about Bucket Match and what that's all about. I think people kind of start putting their heads together. Well, Bucket Match, well, bucket list, that sort of thing. So we're going to kind of dive into all that. Before we do that, like I always do on the show, I like to know a little bit about who you are, just some background, where you're from, where you grew up, that sort of thing.
Sure. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I moved around a little bit, but I've ended up in San Diego, which is actually also where I went to college. So I came back here and I live here now with my partner and my dog. As you mentioned, I'm the founder of Bucket Match, which we can get into, but online platform that helps connect people based on their bucket list goals. And I know we'll get into it, but there's a whole story behind, why I decided to do that in the first place. But yeah, I describe myself as an entrepreneur and bucket list enthusiast.
There you go. I love it. Entrepreneur, bucket list enthusiast. Do you have any siblings or did you just solo growing up? What was growing up like for you?
Yeah, I have an older sister. She lives in Santa Barbara, California with her family, with her husband and daughter. And she and I grew up very close. And so really grateful for that. I have a really good relationship with my parents as well. They're both still back in the Bay Area. So small, but very tight-knit family.
Good. Love it. Awesome. So yeah, we're going to dive into your story because I think your story is pretty fascinating. And I think it's a story that a lot of us could relate to. It seems very relatable, just kind of the stuff you went through. So if you don't mind, kind of give us the background on, so as far as I understand it, I mean, you were kind of on that path of like, hey, this is life and I'm living the path. And then some things happened and things changed. So if you don't mind, dive into wherever you feel like you want to start with this.
Yeah, sure. Typically, I guess the headline is I gave a TEDx talk about an experience, a project that I embarked on, which was I tried to do 52 things from my bucket list in 52 weeks, which is 1 year. But I'll explain why. Why did I even do that in the first place?
Right.
So if we go back to 2019, pre-COVID, I was living in New York City at the time, had a beautiful apartment. I was at the top of my career. I just got a promotion at work. I was making more money than I'd ever made before, and on so many levels, I had thought I had reached the milestones that were supposed to make me happy. And the truth is, once I reached these milestones, and I realized I was no happier, that actually set me into a year-long struggle where I battled suicidal ideation. The way I like to describe to people is I wasn't like sad necessarily. I just kind of felt like life was meaningless because by hitting these vanity metrics, if you will, and realizing I was no happier, I started to question, like, is it possible to even be happy at all? Or will I always just be chasing after, the next rung on the ladder without actually fulfilling myself? And so that's what really spawned this year-long battle where I just kind of felt like, what's the point of living? And I didn't want to be here anymore. But I held on for a few different reasons, which we can get into. One of them being, the tightness with my family, as I mentioned. And then fast forward to December 2019, my mom went in to get back surgery, and the surgery did not go as planned. I wake up to a phone call from my dad saying, "Hey, Jeremy, mom ended up going into cardiac arrest. She is currently undergoing something called hypothermic protocol, which is basically where they freeze the body to just try to stop everything from happening. They kind of want to freeze your body in time." And so they had saved her life. But what we didn't know was when she sort of melted out of hypothermic protocol, would she be brain dead, or would she be, what shape would her brain be in? Would she recognize us? Things like that. And so he said, "I really think you should fly home. And, I think we should all be here." My sister flew up from Santa Barbara to be there for that moment. Excuse me. This is always the hardest part. And so I just remember, on that flight over, obviously a lot of emotions going through my mind, but one that really stands out is I felt guilty. Here my mom is fighting for her life. And here I was, healthy, you know, generally wealthy. I had no reasons to be unhappy. I had no reasons to be, concerned for my life. And yet I was contemplating whether I even wanted to be around anymore. And on that flight over, I took the conviction to say, I'm going to take control of my life. I have no reasons not to want to be here. So let me figure out why. Let me actually do the things that I want to do. And, thankfully, if we fast forward, my mom, she made it. She made a full recovery. She's cognitively able. She's mobile. And as my dad likes to say, we learned the lesson without the consequence. And so that was sort of the first of three things that happened. The second was COVID. And of course, as we all know, once the pandemic hit, we were all forced to reconcile with how fragile life can really be and that it can really be turned upside down any moment. And then a few months later, I was laid off from that job that I'd just gotten promoted at. And so the series of events really just culminated in me questioning, well, since so much is out of my control in my life, why don't I actually just go after the things that I do want and make the most of my time here? And so that's when I decided to rediscover my bucket list, and, happy to jump into that project. But that was sort of the why behind why I decided to spend a full year just dedicated to a bunch of things on my bucket list.
I think it's incredible. I want to go back to that 2019 year because you said that was the year, you're hitting all these milestones. Boom, I'm getting promoted. I got more money than I've ever had. Living the life, I think you're a bachelor at the time. You're living the bachelor life, just, hey, everything's rolling, but you weren't happy. And there was some guilt with that. There was some, like, why am I not feeling this way? What do you think it was? Because you set goals and you accomplished the goals, which most people, that makes people happy. What do you think it was for you? Why do you think that wasn't, achieving these things? Why wasn't it good enough for you?
I think that's a great call out. And I think, the first thing I should say is in the moment, it was fun, right? Like, I don't want to sort of breeze past that. I was proud of myself in many ways for having achieved these goals. And, I was making good money and I was performing well at work. And as you said, yeah, in many ways, I was living the bachelor life that I thought I was supposed to be doing. What I realized was there was a lot of emptiness to that. And I think the reality is that these weren't actually goals that I had set for myself. These were goals that I just sort of thought were the things I was supposed to go after: more money, more status, more wealth, more romantic connections, all those things. But they weren't things that actually mattered to me when it really came down to, like, if I'm sitting on my deathbed looking back on my life, what are the things I'm going to regret? Part of the catalyst for me was I came across this study that found that 76% of people laying on their deathbeds, when they're asked to look back on their lives, what are they most likely to regret? 76% of people regret the things they did not do more than the things that they did. And what I realized for me is the reason I was so deeply unhappy was because in pursuit of these again, I'll call them sort of vanity metrics, things that I just thought society expected of me because that's what I saw on my Instagram feed. Pursuing those vanity metrics made me neglect all these other things that I actually wanted to experience in my lifetime. And those are all the things on my bucket list. And I think, a lot of folks, when they hear the term bucket list, you just think of like epic travel and adventure, skydiving, northern lights. And while those are certainly things that were on my bucket list too, a true bucket list is just anything that you want to do or try before you die. And it can be as simple as I wanted to pay for a stranger's meal. I wanted to dye my hair just because I was curious what that would look like. And so I realized that it's because the goals that I had or the milestones I had achieved were not actually my own. They were just what I thought was expected of me.
It's a good way to look at it. I feel like the reason I think I was so excited to talk to you too is I feel like we're kind of on the same path. I think 2019 I was kind of in the same mode. Of course, I was married, had kids and everything, but I'm plugging away and I just wasn't happy with work. And then COVID sent me, I got laid off and had to change the whole thing. End up starting this podcast, which I absolutely love. It's been a huge benefit. There's just, things that I haven't done that I was able to do because of what happened. You talked about something that's very kind of important. And I think a lot of people feel this way, but maybe don't think it, because you talked about suicidal ideation. And I think you called it, when I was reading your thing, passive. What's the correct term? Passive
Yeah.
or
Passive suicidal ideation.
Passive suicidal ideation, which I think in a lot of more people have this than what people think, because I think you don't have any plans to do anything about it, but in your mind you're like, it'd be okay if I didn't wake up tomorrow. It'd be all right if I wasn't here. I've kind of dealt a little bit with that myself. So I'm thinking, man, this is like, which is pretty serious thinking. And you're kind of dealing with that. And it kind of took the catalyst of your mom almost dying to kind of snap out of it, it sounds like. And then of course COVID happened and so many different things. But I love the fact that you said, all right, bucket list. What are some things I want to do? And I agree with you about bucket list, because I had a guest on who, he's not a huge fan of bucket list because he feels like it's always just about trying to show how cool you are and do something big and epic, but it doesn't have to be. So how did you come up with this idea to do these 52 weeks, these bucket list items in a year, 52 weeks, one thing per week?
Yeah. So for me, I had actually started my bucket list when I was a freshman in college. That was the first bucket list that I'd actually written down. I was inspired by this TV show called The Buried Life, where four guys, they went and they tried to do 100 things from their bucket list. And for everything they did, they tried to help someone else. It was an MTV show at the time. This would have been 2009. And when I created that initial bucket list, it was 100 things I want to do before I graduate college.
Gotcha.
So, I've got this 4-year time period. Let me make the most of it. And when I had gotten laid off and I sort of had this time to just like think back and reflect more deeply, I came across that statistic, as you mentioned, or as we discussed, and I found that old bucket list. And so I like to say, I sort of brushed off the digital dust and I reread that whole thing. And it's not like my bucket list was super cool or epic or anything, but rereading that reinvigorated for me a sense of enthusiasm for life that I just hadn't felt in a long time. And it's just because these goals were authentic to me and they reminded me of like, who am I really? I think a true bucket list is the most authentic reflection of who you are and who you want to become. And although not everything on that list mattered to me anymore, what I decided was, let me take a look at this list. It had over 200 things on it. So, I scratched some things off. I added some new ideas. And then I said, okay, if I'm going to try to dedicate 1 year to this, that's 52 weeks. Let me just pull 52 things from this bucket list, the 52 that speak most to me, and let me just go after it. And there wasn't a ton of thought behind that, right? It was sort of like, I just need to put some structure around it. One of the things that I think is really important when you're setting goals is just to create those parameters that make it really objective. It has to be somewhat realistic, but it should push you a little bit, right? It should challenge you outside your comfort zone. So I said, all right, 52 goals, 52 weeks. Let's see what happens.
Wow. Okay. I got to hear some of these things that you did. Now, were you operating from New York still, or were you still living in New York when you started this?
So yes, at that time I was still living in New York, and then I ended up moving back to the Bay Area once I like really dove all in on this.
Wow. Okay. I love it too. I love how you kind of created it as a project for yourself. All right. What was number one on your list? Let's start there. I'm not going to go through all 52, but what was number one? Because I know there's always a starting point.
It would take us a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started small, right? Actually, literally the first number one on my list was just to write the list. So that was an easy one. I was able to cross that one off day one.
Perfect. Hey, and
then after that,
there's something to be said for marking something off too. When you check something off, there's something to be, for at least for me, I'm kind of that way. So, hey,
Absolutely.
start off easy. I like it.
It just, gives you that initial momentum and that feeling when studies have actually shown that just by writing your goal down, you're 42% more likely to achieve it than if you just keep it in your head. So step number one is truly just get it from your mind onto paper, right? Just get it written down. And then there's a series of things after that. You got to create an action plan. You should share it with a friend, bring yourself some accountability, but just write it down. That's goal number one. And then after that, I started by doing things that were relatively easy. Like, I paid for a stranger's meal, as I mentioned. I tried to I did dye my hair because that was something that I was always just curious to do. I did a daily good deed for somebody, for a different person every day for 30 days. And so, when you start small and you start to sort of accumulate these experiences, it becomes easier to then start planning for and really dreaming about and thinking about the bigger things, right? Some of the biggest one on my bucket list probably was I biked 650 miles down Highway 1 in California, the Pacific Coast Highway, from San Francisco to San Diego. I went cliff jumping in Hawaii. I walked through glaciers in Alaska, but I also pushed the edge of my emotional comfort zone. I learned how to play guitar and I performed in front of an audience, which I had never done before. I learned how to do a magic trick that I could do anywhere. So a huge, wide variety, right? But these were all things that spoke to me in some way and things that I felt would be fulfilling, regardless of what society thinks, right? That was kind of the key.
Yeah. I think that's the big key too, is regardless of what they think, because someone may say, well, that's not paying a meal for somebody's not a bucket list thing, but for you, it was a thing. And I'm going to ask about a few of these things that you just mentioned. And I kind of want you to take me there a little bit. Tell me the story behind it. And I want to hear about that paying for a stranger's meal. Kind of what was the situation? How did you go about it? Just kind of give me, even if it was just a simple little thing. How did you do this?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. So paying for the stranger's meal, I literally just showed up to a McDonald's and I said, hey, I just want to pay for the person behind me. And it was that simple. And it's funny because it's such a simple thing. And when you talk about it in retrospect, it's like, wow, that couldn't have been hard at all. But I kid you not, like my nerves just going into that moment, right? I was like so nervous to do this like nice thing for someone else. It's kind of funny. But what was so great about it was that person was so thankful and they ended up paying for the person behind them. And so I started this chain
Started
reaction.
the chain.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. The reason I did that, by the way, is because someone paid for my meal once. This was back in college. I had no money. I was sort of stranded. I'm in this place. It's not that I literally had no money in my bank account. I just didn't have my wallet on me. And I remember I got to the front of the line and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I don't have my wallet. And the woman behind me very generously paid for me. And to her, it was probably a no big deal. Hey, here's some college kid who, he just forgot his wallet. But for me, it meant so much because I didn't have a lot back then. And for someone to go out of the way to be so kind to a complete stranger who they'll never see again was really touching. And so that was the moment that I added that to my bucket list, was I want to pay for someone else's.
I love it. That's a great example. A couple of the other things you did, and you can pick one of these, either the guitar or the magic trick, learning how to do a magic trick, but also guitar and then playing in front of people. That's that's intimidating. That's got to be scary as well. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about a true bucket list, right? It's a list of all these things you want to do before you die. By definition, you probably haven't done any of them before. So you are a complete novice. You are starting from scratch in many ways. That's part of what makes it so exhilarating and frankly so rewarding, is that you are constantly challenging yourself to push yourself just slightly outside of your comfort zone, and you're expanding the radius of your comfort zone. I think as children, it's actually really easy for us because everything is so new. But as adults, it's so uncomfortable to be like completely a beginner at something. Especially the higher up you go, the more, the more power, the more wealth, the more status, the more expertise that you accumulate through your life. It's so challenging to then put yourself in this completely vulnerable position because you don't think of yourself as a beginner anymore. But as I started to strip away all those notions of like who I should be and what my identity is and just allow myself to be brand new, you get some of that childlike optimism and wonder for the world again. One of the things, as you described, that I always wanted to do was perform in front of an audience. And when I wrote that on my bucket list, I actually didn't know what it would be. I didn't know if it would be, do stand-up comedy or do a poetry slam or, play. But separately on my bucket list, I also had learned how to play guitar. Very specifically, the parameter was like, I want to learn how to play 3 songs. The way that it happened was I just was sharing my bucket list with anybody who would listen, really. Just kind of sharing this project, knowing that the more I got it out there, the more the world would respond and help me in some way. And one of my good friends from high school, who I hadn't talked to in years, happened to be a guitar teacher. And he heard about this bucket list and he said, "Hey, man, I'm happy to give you some free lessons to help you just cross this thing off your list." And so we started connecting over Zoom, and he helped me learn how to play guitar. He helped me learn a few songs. And then fast forward 3 months, I was hanging out at his house, and he learned that something else on my bucket list was to perform in front of an audience. And he said, "Well, hey, I've got a show that's coming up this Friday. Do you want to open for me?" And of course, every bone in my body was like, no, I'm not ready for that. Appreciate the invite, but I can't do it. But he countered my objection. He said, "Look, you of all people know the value of stepping out of your comfort zone and doing this thing. You told me it's on your bucket list. You want to cross it off this year. This is the best chance to do it." And so next thing you know, I'm opening for my buddy Mitchell. And I shared the story behind it so the audience knew like why I was not going to be very good. But I completely blacked out during the performance. But when I finished, I just remembered the applause and the uproar was incredibly encouraging. But I like to share that story because the reason I did it wasn't because of me. It was because of Mitchell. Mitchell was the reason I was able to cross that off my bucket list. And that's the power of sharing your bucket list with other people.
That brings up a great point, and I know that's a huge thing for you with the bucket list, and I want to ask about some other highlights here in a minute, but talk about that, the importance of telling people and having community behind this, because I think I got the sense from you, and I think with your company now, that's so important, is to let people know what you're doing and to seek the help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, if we go way back for a second, you mentioned this before. Um, Even when I think about, the big overwhelming theme of passive suicidal ideation, I think there is this very silent but pervasive problem. When my TEDx talk came out, I was blown away by the number of messages I received from people sharing similar sentiments of how they sort of felt like they were floating through life, but they weren't really deliberately going after the life they wanted. And as a result of that, they were terrified they would wake up someday and realize that they lost their chance. And we all have a tendency to not want to be vulnerable. And when you share your goals with the world and you ask for help, you have to accept a, a measurable amount of vulnerability in doing that. For me, I realized that that was my biggest superpower. I created a rule for myself that for every single thing on my bucket list, I had to at least recruit one other person to help me out in some way, whether they joined me and actually did the thing with me, or maybe they were a mentor or coach like Mitchell was that could show me how to do the thing, or even just simply an accountability buddy, someone that would help me hold accountable to it. Maybe they could help me do some research and planning, et cetera, save time. And so the reason I started Bucket Match is anecdotally I experienced that, but the data shows, right? When you create a goal, you write it down, you put a plan together, and you share it with a friend that you trust, you are 77.6% more likely to achieve that goal than if you just keep it in your head. And the majority of us, we have these goals, we have these things we want to do, but we just keep it up here. And so the social accountability element allows you to save time. It makes it easier. And most importantly, it makes the experience a lot more fun.
Definitely. I love it. That's fantastic. So I do want to hear about some of the other highlights, because I know you mentioned glaciers in Alaska. I think one of the things I saw that you did was you drew out of a hat somewhere that you were supposed to go. Can you tell me about that one, how that came about?
One of the goals on my bucket list was to pick a country blindfolded and to take a trip there, wherever it was. The asterisk for this was because I was doing this sort of coming out of COVID era, there were a lot of travel restrictions, right? So I was doing this in late 2020, early 2021. And so as a result of that, I couldn't truly pick anywhere on a globe and go there. I had to choose out of a smaller list. But I shared that idea. One of my friends, Nick, said, "Hey, that sounds awesome. That's something I've always wanted to do too. Let's do it." Nick and I ended up recruiting another one of my friends, Sebastian. And so we got together one day on Zoom. This was, again, COVID era, so we're all on Zoom. I had a hat with a bunch of different countries, cut out on pieces of paper on it, and blindfolded. We ended up picking out Costa Rica, which was a pretty awesome place to pick out of a hat blindfolded. And the rest is history. We had an incredible trip to Costa Rica. It was, the most exhilarating thing, sort of sitting there and wondering what were we going to land on. So yeah, that was a great one to cross off.
What was the time frame from like picking out of the hat to when you actually went? Was it pretty quick, or was it take a while?
That's actually a great question. So quick side story there is the first country that we picked was actually Barbados. So very different. But so the first country we landed on was Barbados. 2 days before we were supposed to go to Barbados, we get an email from the hotel that we're supposed to stay at saying that the country has actually shut down its borders due to COVID restrictions. And so we suddenly had no destination to go to. So I get on a call with the guys and I say, look, I totally understand if you guys don't want to do this anymore, because we're going to have to like refigure out this whole thing. They had to request the time off work. And they were like, no, we're doing this, right? Like we already have the time set. I'm ready to go somewhere. I'm ready to go on this adventure. And so we repicked the country. Thankfully, we got Costa Rica and not, some war-torn nation. And we left. So we had 48 hours between the moment that we picked the country and when we landed in Costa Rica. So only adds to the story.
For sure. I think that just adds to the enjoyment of it, the excitement of it, the adventure of it. Absolutely. Yep. I love that. Any other highlights of things that you said you biked from San Francisco to San Diego? That's pretty intense. What other one or two other, highlights or stories you want to share?
Yeah, I love the biking trip. I love because it serves as like a really good metaphor for kind of the entire experience. And so for a bit of context, the reason I wanted to do this is I grew up in the Bay Area, as I mentioned, went to school in San Diego. I had driven up and down, tons of times, but I had never like stopped to just enjoy the California coastline. And I had always thought, what if I actually just like took my time to go down and see this entire path? It was a very sentimental value to me because it was a path I had gone so many times, but I'd never really like biked before. I knew I wasn't going to walk that full duration. So I figured, let me just see what this would look like. And I got help from all kinds of people. A few friends of mine who picked up cycling and they knew it really well. They helped me pick out which bike I would use. I actually found a guy on YouTube who had done that same route. I reached out to him and he shared his entire training plan, his itinerary, his diet plan. He shared everything that he did to make this trip happen. And that expedited the process for me tremendously, which again, it really goes back to like when you connect with people around your goals, it makes everything more feasible. And then when I was on the trip itself, I had friends that joined me all throughout the trip. It was a 10-day trip. So I would have friends join me for certain legs, other friends that would let me crash at their apartment, just for a night or give me a meal halfway through the day. And so although it was something that I felt that I had achieved, doing that 10-day, 650-mile bike ride, it was all about the people. And the last person that I should mention who's most important is my friend Andrew, who actually joined me for the entire trip down. And so sitting at the end of that trip, holding our beers, commemorating that whole experience, it really brought together everything for me, which is like, you can't do it alone, or you shouldn't try. You shouldn't try to do it alone. It's easier and more enjoyable when you have other people.
Absolutely. I love it. Now, this is great. You share some great highlights, some cool things that helped you personally, helped you physically, helped you spiritually. I mean, it's helped you in a lot of ways. But I know, like anything we do, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be setbacks. What kind of challenges did you face while doing this? I know, and in fact, I don't think you even accomplished all 52 things. I think you had a few things that you couldn't get done. Can you kind of let me know about some of the challenges?
Yeah, one of the things I like to always emphasize is I didn't actually finish all 52. And I think a lot of people, when they hear that I gave a TEDx talk about the experience, they assume it was all success. And the reality is I got 32 done out of the 52. So that's, a D minus if you're looking at academic records. One of the lessons that I share in sort of what I took away from this experience was the importance of celebrating failure and celebrating rejection. So I have, I obviously have 20 goals that I didn't achieve. Things like I've always wanted to, I wanted to turn $1,000 into $10,000 just in 24 hours, just to like see how crazy we could get. Friend and I went to Las Vegas. We tried to, do a bunch of gambling and we failed miserably. Right. One of the things on my bucket list was to be able to compete on reality TV, whether it's, Survivor, Amazing Race, MTV Challenge, whatever it is. I applied to probably 15 different shows and I didn't get a single one. One of the things on my bucket list is to take a selfie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I've been told he's my doppelganger and I've always thought it would be funny to just have that picture on my phone. I reached out to his team. They did respond, but they said no, thanks, but no thanks. And so as part of this journey, I realized that it's not really about whether you successfully achieve the goal or not, as much as it is about just trying, like just taking the leap on the thing that you've always wanted to do. That's what's actually so rewarding. And so I learned to celebrate failure because that helped me actually get more addicted to the process as opposed to the end result. And, even to give this TEDx talk, a lot of people don't know that in order to get the talk, I actually reached out to 11 different venues and I only heard back from one. which is, less than a 10% success rate. But the one that got back said yes. And I think it's an important reminder for us that if you just try, that's already winning. And then maybe you'll get, the reward at the end, or maybe not. But either way, just, give it a shot. And that's what matters.
Yeah, I think that's so important too. And let's take a look at this. So you did your year-long project, the 52 weeks, and you only got 32 of them done, but you learned a lot. Like you said, you celebrate failure a little bit and the lessons it taught you. When you look back on the overall, when you were done and you look back, what did it do for you? Kind of what were your thoughts looking back to, like, okay, remember when I was, had some suicidal ideation? Kind of what was your thinking when you were done? Like, what did it do for you?
For me, it helped me redefine how I measure success in life. Something that I don't want to sugarcoat is I still struggle at times with that suicidal ideation. Those thoughts do come back. But the most powerful thing for me is I know that there is a light after that. I feel so much more conviction that I can get out of it because I've experienced it firsthand, that I was able to rediscover my reason for wanting to live in the first place. And that's really what it came down to, is I just felt like, what's the point of living? And again, it's because I had been chasing the wrong goals. And so now for me, I've recognized that success for me in life isn't about all these things that society has prescribed to me. For me, I measure the richness of my life based on the experiences that I can share with other people. Whether they're good or bad experiences actually doesn't matter as much to me, is what I've realized. Because sometimes the shittiest situations, excuse my French, those create the best stories and the best memories. And that actually makes my life feel really rich too. So my MO in life is just to go and experience as much as I can. And that's not just travel and adventure like we talked about. Those are big things. But I think starting a podcast, that's an adventure, right? Trying to start a business, that's an adventure. Spending more time with my family because I know that they're not going to be around forever. That's an adventure. Those are all adventures I want to go on. And that's how I measure happiness.
I love it. And that's one question I always ask on the show, is I ask people, what adventure means to them. You sort of kind of described it there. If you were to put it into a definition for you, Jeremy, what does adventure mean to you?
I think that, to me, adventure means doing something that helps stretch the edge of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Of everybody I ask, I think the word I hear comfort zone a lot when I ask this question. Because I feel it's so true. I think that's where a lot of our growth is getting outside that comfort zone, stretching it a little bit. 100%. And I still struggle with that. I struggle to get out of my comfort zone a lot. So I love hearing people talk about it because it motivates me to get out of it. You talked about a few things. You talked about, like, for example, celebrating failure. There's a couple other things that I know you mentioned in your TEDx talk that I kind of want to touch on, if you don't mind, some of the lessons that you learned. And the first one, and I know this was kind of big, you mentioned this right at the beginning, confronting mortality. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think you and I chatted on this a little bit, I think, before we started. I think a lot of people are afraid to confront mortality, right? It's an uncomfortable thought. It's an uncomfortable conversation. And it can sort of feel like it's a morbid place to be. What I found is because, mortality, or the idea of death, came to me without my choice, right? I just started having suicidal ideation. It wasn't something I signed up for, but here we were. So I was forced to reconcile with the fact that I might not wake up tomorrow. But when you talk to people who, have had near death experiences, or folks who work in hospice, who are surrounded by people who are constantly passing, you realize that it can actually be incredibly empowering. Because what it allows you to do is it allows you to strip away all the things that don't actually matter. Because if you're truly on your deathbed and you truly don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow, you don't care about the trivialities of life. You start spending more time thinking about the things that truly matter to you. And in my case, I'm so grateful that I'm still here, but I was able to sort of have that perspective of feeling like, man, if I wasn't to wake up tomorrow, what would I regret? And so that for me is incredibly empowering. So I think if we reframe the idea that, death and the end of our time is not a scary thing, but it should actually be really helpful for navigating your compass, then I think everyone will have a lot more clarity on it.
Definitely. And I know you've had, besides the close encounter with your mom almost passing away and not sure what was going to happen there, I believe you had a friend when you were just a youngster who passed away. I know you had a buddy who committed suicide. Do you mind just kind of sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah. My first encounter with, like, real sort of intimate relationship to death was my friend Bobby Kramer, who passed away when we were 11 years old. I think at that point in my life, I was too young to, like, fully understand and grasp like what had happened. But at such a young age, to have someone so close to you just no longer exist, at least not in my, in my form of reality, it really struck you home that like, oh, there is a permanence to this. And I think although obviously it's really tough as a young child to have to go through that, it did shape the way that I viewed the world, I think from a young age. And I started to think more about life and death and what does it really mean to be here and how do you make the most of our time here. Hence the reason I was so intrigued by creating a bucket list, because I knew that I wouldn't be here forever. And then I did more recently have a friend that took his own life, and that was a huge shock. And so he actually, in many ways, helped me when I was going through my own suicidal ideation, because I remember thinking, Alex, you had so much going for you, right? Like, why did you do it? You had so much that you could have done in this world. And so that allowed me to actually look at my own self objectively and say, Jeremy, you have so much going on for you, right? Why you shouldn't do this. I know you shouldn't. So I'm really grateful to him in that sense. But yeah, these are topics that people don't tend to like to discuss on a day-to-day basis. And I think I'm partially on a mission to help just normalize that conversation, because like I said, I think it can be empowering more than
Appreciate you sharing that. A couple other things you mentioned. Catalog your dreams. What does that mean? Writing them down? What does that mean?
Yeah. I use the word catalog intentionally because there's certainly value in writing it down. And I think you should bring it to life in some way. So not only should you write down what you want to do, but add pictures, videos, inspirational quotes, memories, whatever it is that truly like brings this goal to life and helps you think of it as more than just a thing that I'm going to check off. That helps remind you of like why you want to do this in the first place. By cataloging your dream and adding photos and videos and things of that nature, you start to already visualize success, which then brings you one step closer to actually doing this.
So with your list that you made, that the 52 weeks, and I know you obviously number one was start the list, write the list, boom,
Yeah.
check. Did you do that with any of the other ones? Did you add some pictures? How did you do some? Can you give us few examples of what you did to catalog your dreams for your bucket list?
Yeah, for sure. So for everything on my bucket list, I did my best to try to, sort of help visualize it in some way. And so for some of them, I'm trying to think. So like whether it was cliff jumping in Hawaii, and just putting together a collage of a bunch of dudes and gals jumping off and doing cool things. If it was, one of my goals was to spend the day at the beach from sunrise to sunset, just to sort of be a part of that full day. And so I would have videos of people that were doing that. I wanted to learn how to nail a 360 on a jump on a snowboard. And so I would just have pictures and videos of people doing that. But then the more sentimental ones, like one of my goals was to handwrite a thank you letter. Something I just hadn't done probably since I was a child. Everything's over email now. My inspiration for that was I wrote a thank you letter to the doctor that saved my mom's life. So, obviously that had a very emotionally triggering response when I used my mom's photo of her in the hospital. That was my reminder. That was my source of inspiration for why I wanted to write this thank you letter. The emotion, I think, is what drives you. And it's easiest to inspire emotion in ourselves when we have visuals attached to it.
Absolutely. I love it. You had a few other things, and I think we kind of touched on some of those already. So I want to dive into Bucket Match, because you took what you did and now you've created a company out of it. What is Bucket Match? How do you get involved? Kind of what's the purpose behind it? Just kind of, tell us about Bucket Match.
Yeah. So Bucket Match, we launched publicly December of last year. So been live for just under 4 months, but it's an online platform. It connects people based on their bucket list goals. And our mission is to help people take the leap on their bucket list dreams by finding inspiration and help from other people in the community. And the way that it works is pretty simple. You log in, it's a free account, at least for now. You write down what's on your bucket list. And then our job is to algorithmically go and match you with other people in our database that either have that same goal. Maybe it's a friend of yours that has the same idea and you guys can go off and do it together. You can help each other with planning, or we'll match you with someone who's actually just recently crossed off that thing you're trying to do. And as I found in my experience, they can coach you through the process. They probably have, done some research. They have itineraries or playbooks, diet schedules, whatever it is that you would be able to benefit from to actually go and achieve your thing. And, as I described, for me, the number one rule and the catalyst that I found, the thing that was most indicative of whether I successfully achieved a goal or not, was if I just had one other person in my corner. And that's why it's so important for Bucket Match to just say, hey, Jake, I know you want to do X. Here's 5 other people that can help you do it. Good luck.
That's amazing. I'm guessing because of the fact that you've got access, this is your company and you've got access to this. I'm guessing you're seeing some pretty cool things that people are putting as their bucket. Can you give us kind of a behind the scenes and maybe some of the things that people are putting as their bucket list
such
items?
a great question. I actually just did a post on this not too long ago. Just trying to remember what all the unique goals were. But so short answer, yes. I mean, right now we have just over 400 users, just over 1,500 bucket list goals, and there's a lot of really interesting ones in there. And that's part of what I love about it, is just seeing like what are the things that other people want to do. I'll start with the most common ones because that's the easiest for me to remember. Yeah. Most common one is to see the Northern Lights, which is I guess in some ways not a surprise. But so you get a lot of adventure ones, right? I want to go see the Northern Lights. Second most common is actually around learning a new language. So we see a lot of like skill development or personal growth ones. So a lot of people want to learn a new language. Third most common as a category is to write a book. So I think as a human species, we have this desire to just like create and leave behind. So we want to sort of leave the world better than we found it. And especially I think as you get older, you want to be able to create something that you can pass on to future generations. So whether it's write a book, start a company, something tangible that you can leave behind. Some of the more unique ones is I saw someone who wanted to train Kung Fu with Drukpa nuns in Nepal, I believe. So it's like this very specific group of nuns that know how to do crazy Kung Fu. That's a really interesting one. I've seen someone who wants to grow their rubber band ball to 50 pounds. It's 20 pounds right now, I guess.
Wow. Okay.
I have a friend who he wants to learn how to fly a plane from Alaska to Argentina, like the furthest north, the northernmost point of Alaska to the southernmost point of Argentina. So that's a big one that he's probably going to be working on for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, all kinds of really interesting ideas out there.
All right, let me give you a scenario here. Say someone like me pops on and I just don't necessarily have ideas of what I want to do, but I know I was like, I want to do something, but I'm not sure. Can someone like me pop on and just kind of see what other people are doing and maybe be inspired?
Yeah, so we have an explore page where you can actually see all of the different ideas, the different bucket list goals that people have. And we've organized it to make it a little bit easier to digest. So we have different categories like, travel and adventure or personal development goals, creative goals, finance goals, etc. And so you can kind of scroll through it the same way. It sort of looks like a Netflix screen, so you've got like horror movies, comedies, etc. And so you can scroll through them. If you see an idea that you like, just single click and it'll be automatically added to your bucket list. And the thing that I actually really love is if you see something you've already done before, you can click a different button that says, hey, I've done this. And so it'll be added to your list and then automatically crossed off. And what I love about that is it helps some people realize, you and I talked about how some people think, bucket list goals are like too focused on just like big epic adventures. And when you see something on someone else's bucket list that you're like, I've already done that. I didn't even know that was, bucket list worthy. I think it reframes our idea of what it means to live a truly fulfilled life, which is, hey, you've actually already done a lot of really cool things that are on other people's bucket lists. And so that's kind of a nice takeaway that I think a lot of folks have.
Oh yeah, I love it. This is quite interesting. You've only been doing this for a few months now, so you said you went live in December, I believe. What kind of, I don't know, feedback or what kind of, have people done it? Have they, has it worked out for people? Like what kind of feedback are you getting?
The biggest piece of feedback I get around like how we can make Bucket Match better is continuing to inspire more community engagement. So like one of the number one things that I want to build out in this next quarter is a way for people to engage with each other in a more community fashion. Right now, really the only way you can engage with folks is kind of one-on-one. So if I see something on Jake's bucket list that I like, I can give you a little heart icon like every other social app. So I can tell you, hey Jake, I like this idea. Or if I want to message you, hey, Jake, I saw that you started a podcast. I want to start a podcast. Can you help me out? But I think that then requires you to conform to like just a one-to-one relationship. And the reality is, even in my own personal experience, the value that I got from sharing my bucket list was that people from all different walks of life were able to help with different parts of it, right? There wasn't like typically one single person that helped me do the whole thing. And so I'm really excited to create more community forums. We're going to have a discovery feed where everyone can see like what's everyone else up to. You can post something to say, hey, I've got this crazy idea. Can anyone help me out? And people can comment on it. So, for anyone that's listening, if you sign up, you should see more community engagement that's going to be coming out in the next couple of months.
Excellent. And yeah, tell everybody where they can find it, what the webpage is, and just where they can get access to all this.
Yeah, website is www.bucketmatch.ai. Yeah, free to sign up, as I mentioned before, until probably the end of June. We'll start charging for the app in a little bit, but for now it's completely free. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Jeremy George at Bucket Match. I should probably be the first guy that shows up.
Excellent. I love it. This has been fascinating. I've learned a lot about who you are. I love your story. I think it's relatable to a lot of people. And I love the fact that you're out there trying to, do what you're doing. I want to ask a little bit about the future. Okay, besides Bucket Match, what other goals do you have for the future? What are you looking at moving forward?
You'll have to log into Bucket Match and take a look at my bucket list to see what all's there. But, in all seriousness, right now I'm so dedicated to the business. I think this is really one of the biggest goals on my bucket list that I'm trying to achieve. But outside of that, um, I want to have a family. I want to be able to, shape that. And as I've mentioned a few times, I have a really tight knit family as well, and that's an important thing for me to be able to pass on. So that's really critical. That's on my bucket list, is to raise a family. I want to be able to converse with the world more. So I've traveled a lot, but I haven't always been able to engage at the level that I'd want to. I think there's sort of superficial travel, and then there's more immersed travel. So I want to learn more languages. Part of the reason I wanted to learn a magic trick is because you can do magic anywhere in the world and you can connect with someone right away, right? Even if you don't speak a single language that the other person understands, you can even do a magic trick to a monkey and they will get it, right? And so I think it's just a powerful way to connect with other people. So I want to find more ways to be able to connect with as many people on this planet as I can.
Now, kind of a tough question for you to end up.
Yeah.
Of the things that you did, the 32 things that you accomplished, is there any one particular that just stands out to you like, wow, for whatever reason? Which one? If you had to pick one, and I know you've probably, really, it's been all of them for you because they've all done something for you. But if you had to pick one, which one would it be?
The one that stands out the most is number 52, actually. So number 52 on my bucket list was to help someone else cross off something from their bucket list. And we did the classic. We went skydiving. But one of my friends, Robert, that's what he wanted to do. And it's funny, I posted something on my Instagram feed, said, hey, what's on your bucket list? And I got a bunch of different responses. And Robert was the first person that I messaged about it. And I said, hey, man, I have this thing. I want to help someone else cross off something on their bucket list. You told me you want to go skydiving. Do you want to do it? And I was sort of expecting him to be a little bit wishy-washy. So I figured I have to move on to the next and probably go through 10 people. Within 5 minutes, Robert responds. He's like, screw it, let's go. And so, next thing you know, we're planning this trip. We're jumping out of an airplane from 13,000 feet. And we actually recruited another one of our friends to join along the way. But what's so amazing about helping someone else do something on their bucket list is you get to see the value of what you've just done in someone else. And I think, I keep talking about the people, but that's really what it all comes down to, is when you experience life with other people in your corner, that's what makes it so enriching. And so for me, I always like to remind myself that that's what made this whole experience so rewarding. So number 52, help someone else cross off something from their bucket list.
I love it. This has been awesome. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Jake, likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
A big thank you to Jeremy George for joining me on the show and sharing his incredible journey of chasing dreams and checking off his bucket list. I was especially struck by how much community means to Jeremy, and I couldn't agree more. It means a lot to me too. If you'd like to learn more about what Jeremy is doing and his mission behind his business, visit bucketmatch.ai. You can also connect with him on LinkedIn or follow him on Instagram at bucketmatch.ai. As Jeremy talked about the Bucket Match community, I couldn't help but think about this community, you, the listeners. I'm honestly humbled and so grateful that you continue to follow along and be part of this journey. When I first started Journey with Jake, it was mostly just a personal project. But now, nearly 200 episodes in, I've come to realize this show is so much more. It's a community built on stories, adventure, and the courage to live fully. And I hope you find meaning in each episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you'd share it with just one person this week. Word of mouth makes such a difference, and I truly appreciate your support. Next week, I've got another amazing episode coming your way. I'll be chatting with Brandon and Amber, who made the bold decision to uproot their family of 6 and move on to a sailboat. It's an inspiring and eye-opening conversation you won't want to miss. And as always, remember, it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.